The massive lecture hall at the Galactic Xenological Institute buzzed with nervous energy as Professor Kethmol walked to the center podium. His forearms moved gracefully as he arranged the holographic displays, each one showing different star systems and their inhabitants. The professor's scaled skin shimmered under the artificial lights as he looked out at his most accomplished graduate students. "Today marks the beginning of your final academic challenge," Professor Kethmol announced, his voice carrying easily through the amphitheater. "Each of you has spent years studying the countless species that make up our galaxy. You have analyzed their cultures, their technologies, their social structures. Now comes your ultimate test." Jinwoo sat in the third row, his crystalline body catching and refracting the light from the displays. As a member of the Nexari species, his entire being was composed of living crystal that could process information at incredible speeds. Had already calculated 17 different approaches to whatever assignment was coming, his mind working through possibilities like a biological computer. Behind him, Minji shifted uncomfortably in her specialized chair. The Vorthak were known throughout the galaxy for their ability to sense emotions and psychological patterns from vast distances. Her ethereal form flickered slightly as she picked up the anxiety radiating from her fellow students. She could feel their excitement mixed with worry, their ambition tempered by fear of failure. Hyunsu stretched his 6 legs beneath his desk, his insectoid form perfectly adapted for long hours of research. His compound eyes took in every detail of the professor's presentation, while his mandibles clicked softly in anticipation. Beside him, Daeon's tentacles curled and uncurled nervously. Her aquatic species had contributed some of the galaxy's most important historical discoveries, and she felt the weight of that legacy. Taehyun remained perfectly still, his rocky exterior betraying none of the thoughts racing through his silicon-based mind. His people were known for their patience and thoroughness, qualities that had made them excellent archaeologists and cultural analysts. "Your assignment," Professor Kethmol continued, "involves a recently contacted species from a small yellow star system designated as Sol. The third planet harbors an intelligent species that calls itself human. They have only just achieved basic space travel and have requested inclusion in our galactic community." A collective murmur ran through the assembled students. New species contacts were rare and highly prized research opportunities. Most civilizations were discovered only after they had already established interstellar capabilities and complex spacefaring societies. "These humans appear to be quite primitive," the professor explained as images of Earth appeared on the displays. "They still use chemical rockets for space travel. Their technology is roughly equivalent to what most species achieve about 1,000 years before reaching the stars. They seem to have stumbled into space travel earlier than expected." Jinwoo's crystalline structure pulsed with interest. Primitive species often provided fascinating insights into the early stages of civilization development. His analytical mind was already cataloging the research methodologies he would employ. "The humans have been surprisingly cooperative," Professor Kethmol noted. "During first contact protocols, they provided extensive historical records, archaeological data, cultural artifacts, digital archives spanning thousands of their years. They seem eager to prove themselves worthy of galactic membership." Minji felt a strange resonance from the human data samples that had been provided. Even through the technological barriers, she could sense something unusual about these beings. Their emotional patterns seemed somehow more intense than typical developing species. "Your task is straightforward," the professor announced. "Conduct a comprehensive analysis of human historical development. Document their social evolution, technological progress, cultural achievements, and behavioral patterns. Determine their suitability for galactic citizenship and provide recommendations for integration protocols." The assignment seemed almost disappointingly routine. Most students had completed similar analyses during their undergraduate studies. Daeon's tentacles drooped slightly with what might have been disappointment. She had hoped for something more challenging for her final project. "You will work as a team," Professor Kethmol added. "Each of you brings unique perspectives from your respective species. Jinwoo, your analytical capabilities will handle data processing. Minji, your psychological insights will be crucial for understanding their behavioral patterns. Hyunsu, Daeon, and Taihyun, your specializations in archaeology, cultural analysis, and historical documentation will round out the research team. The students began accessing the human data archives through their neural interfaces. Terabytes of information flowed into their consciousness. Images of human cities, recordings of their languages, documentation of their scientific achievements, records of their art and literature. As they settled into what they assumed would be months of routine academic work, none of them suspected that they were about to uncover something that would shake the very foundations of galactic civilization. The humans had provided their historical records willingly, almost eagerly. What the students would discover in those records would change everything they thought they knew about intelligence, survival, and the nature of sentient life itself. The research began that very day, 5 brilliant minds from different corners of the galaxy turning their attention to a small blue planet and its seemingly unremarkable inhabitants. The research lab hummed with activity as data streams flowed across multiple holographic displays. What had started as routine academic work was quickly becoming something far more unsettling. Jinwoo's crystalline form pulsed with an unusual orange hue, indicating confusion and concern as he processed the human historical records. "This cannot be correct," Jinwoo muttered, his voice resonating through his crystal structure. He had run the calculations 17 times, each result identical to the last. The data showed that humans had faced not one or two extinction events, but dozens of them throughout their relatively short evolutionary history. The first major discovery came when analyzing Earth's geological records. Approximately 74,000 years ago, a supervolcanic eruption had occurred that should have ended human civilization before it truly began. The Toba eruption had thrown so much ash and debris into the atmosphere that global temperatures dropped dramatically. Most species would have gone extinct within a single generation. "Look at this," Jinwoo called to his teammates, projecting the data into the center of the room. The human population dropped to perhaps 10,000 individuals. Any rational species would have huddled together in the remaining habitable areas and slowly died out. But humans did something different. The records showed that instead of simply surviving, humans had used the crisis as an opportunity to spread across the globe. Small groups had ventured into hostile territories, adapted to new environments, and established colonies in areas previously considered uninhabitable. By the time the volcanic winter ended, humans had actually expanded their range rather than contracted it. Minji floated closer to examine the psychological data from this period. Her ethereal form shimmered as she processed the emotional resonances left in human artifacts and genetic memory patterns. What she found made her recoil in shock. "Their psychological profiles make no sense," she announced to the group. During this extinction event, humans displayed both incredible compassion and ruthless pragmatism. They shared resources with strangers, while simultaneously making calculated decisions about who would receive help and who would be left behind. They formed tight social bonds, while also maintaining the ability to abandon those bonds when survival demanded it. The team discovered that this pattern repeated throughout human history. Ice ages that lasted thousands of years became periods of technological innovation. Plagues that killed a third of their population led to social reforms and scientific advances. Asteroid impacts that would have devastated any other world somehow became catalysts for human expansion and development. Yunsu's compound eyes tracked multiple data streams simultaneously as he uncovered the archaeological evidence. His mandibles clicked rapidly in agitation as pattern after pattern emerged from the ruins of human civilizations. "Every single major human society has fallen," he reported, his insectoid voice carrying an undertone of disbelief. "The Mesopotamians, the Egyptians, the Greeks, the Romans, the Mayans, the Chinese dynasties, the European empires. They all collapsed, often catastrophically." But look what happened next. The holographic displays showed the progression clearly. Each fallen civilization had been replaced by something more advanced, more sophisticated, more capable. The Romans had better engineering than the Greeks. The Renaissance had superior art and science than medieval Europe. Modern humans had technologies that would seem like magic to their ancestors. It is as if they are deliberately destroying their own societies to build better ones, Yunsu continued. No other species does this. When we achieve stable civilization, we maintain it, we preserve it, we improve it gradually over millennia. Humans seem to prefer starting over entirely. Diane's tentacles writhed as she processed cultural data from human archives. Her aquatic species valued stability and continuity above all else, making human behavior particularly disturbing to her sensibilities. Their cultural records show they romanticize destruction, she observed. They have stories, songs, and myths that celebrate the end of worlds, the fall of kings, the collapse of empires. They seem to view catastrophe as opportunity rather than tragedy. This is unprecedented in galactic psychology. As the weeks progressed, the students found themselves working longer hours, driven by a mixture of academic curiosity and growing alarm. The human data revealed survival capabilities that bordered on the impossible. Humans had thrived in Arctic conditions that would freeze most species solid. They had survived in deserts that would dehydrate other beings within hours. They had adapted to high altitudes where oxygen levels would cause brain damage in most galactic citizens. Taehyun's rocky exterior remained impassive, but his internal processes were racing. His geological expertise revealed that Earth itself was unusually hostile to life. Massive continental shifts, frequent volcanic activity, extreme weather patterns, and regular impact events had created a world that served as a constant testing ground for its inhabitants. Other worlds nurture their intelligent species, he noted. Earth seems designed to challenge them, and instead of being weakened by this hostility, humans appear to have been strengthened by it. The team began staying in the lab until the early hours of the morning, sharing discoveries that grew more disturbing with each passing day. Sleep cycles were forgotten as they delved deeper into human records, each revelation more troubling than the last. Minji began experiencing unusual resonance patterns as she studied human emotional data. Their capacity for feeling seemed to exceed safe parameters for intelligent life. They could experience joy so intense it manifested in physical symptoms, grief so profound it could cause actual illness, and anger so powerful it could drive them to incredible feats of strength and endurance. They should not be psychologically stable, she reported during one late-night session. Their emotional range would drive most species to madness, yet somehow they not only maintain sanity, but use these extreme emotions as sources of motivation and creativity. The students realized they were no longer conducting routine academic research. They were uncovering something that challenged fundamental assumptions about intelligence, survival, and the nature of sentient life itself. The laboratory fell silent, as Diane's tentacles trembled while processing the latest batch of human military records. Her aquatic species had developed advanced civilization through cooperation and peaceful resource sharing. What she was discovering about human warfare challenged everything she understood about intelligent behavior. "This cannot be accurate," she whispered, her voice barely audible through the translation device. "The data suggests humans have weaponized everything they have ever encountered, not just metals and chemicals, but concepts, ideas, even their own bodies." The holographic display showed a timeline of human weapon development that stretched back hundreds of thousands of years. It began simply enough with sharpened stones and wooden spears, tools that most species eventually discovered. But then, the progression became increasingly disturbing. Humans had taken fire, a natural phenomenon that most species learned to control for warmth and cooking, and turned it into a weapon of war. They had crafted arrows that could pierce armor, catapults that could destroy fortifications, and eventually explosives that could level entire cities. Each innovation had been driven not by necessity for survival, but by the desire to overcome other humans in conflict. "Look at this progression," Diane continued, her tentacles pointing to different sections of the timeline. They discovered chemistry and immediately began developing poison gases. They learned about biology and created diseases specifically designed to kill their enemies. They split the atom, and within years had weapons capable of destroying their entire planet. Jinwoo's crystalline form flickered as he processed combat data from human history. His analytical mind struggled to comprehend the sheer creativity humans displayed in developing methods of warfare. Other species typically developed weapons gradually over millennia, usually as responses to external threats. Humans seem to innovate military technology at an accelerated pace, often during periods of relative peace. Their weapon development follows no logical pattern, Jinwoo observed. Most species create tools for survival first, then adapt them for warfare when necessary. Humans appear to design weapons specifically for combat, then find peaceful applications afterward. They invented rockets to deliver explosives across continents, then used the same technology to reach space. Taehyun had been quietly analyzing environmental data from human battlefields, and his findings were perhaps the most disturbing of all. His rocky exterior remained motionless, but his internal processors were working overtime to verify what seemed impossible. Humans have fought wars in every conceivable environment on their planet, he announced. I have found battle records from Arctic regions where temperatures would freeze most galactic species solid within minutes. They fought in deserts where the heat would cook internal organs. They waged war in swamps filled with toxic gases and disease-carrying organisms. The holographic displays showed human soldiers adapted to impossible conditions. They had fought battles at altitudes where oxygen levels would cause brain damage in most species. They had engaged in combat underwater, using primitive breathing apparatus to extend their natural limitations. They had even fought in cavern systems deep underground, navigating by torchlight through spaces that would drive most beings to claustrophobic panic. But here is what truly disturbs me, Taehyun continued. They did not simply survive in these environments, they thrived in them. Human military units would deliberately choose hostile terrain for strategic advantage, using their superior adaptation capabilities to defeat enemies who could not match their environmental tolerance. Minji had been analyzing the psychological profiles of human warriors throughout history, and her ethereal form was flickering with distress. The emotional patterns she discovered defied every model of stable, intelligent behavior. Their warriors display psychological traits that should be mutually exclusive, she reported. They show deep compassion for their comrades while simultaneously demonstrating the ability to kill without hesitation. They form powerful emotional bonds with their units while maintaining the psychological flexibility to make calculated sacrifices of those same individuals. The record showed human soldiers who would risk their lives to save wounded comrades, then moments later make tactical decisions that would send other comrades to certain death. They displayed loyalty so intense it bordered on religious devotion, yet could adapt their allegiances based on changing political circumstances. Yunsu discovered perhaps the most unsettling aspect of human military behavior. His compound eyes tracked data streams showing that humans had never achieved true peace in their entire recorded history. Even during periods labeled as peaceful, they maintained massive military forces and continued developing weapons technology. They treat peace as preparation for the next war, Hyunsu observed, his mandibles clicking in agitation. During their longest periods without major conflicts, they actually accelerated military research and development. They created war colleges to study combat theory. They conducted military exercises to practice for battles that had not yet occurred. The team discovered that humans extended their warrior mentality beyond simple combat with other humans. When diseases threatened their populations, they declared war on the pathogens and mobilized their entire civilization to defeat them. When natural disasters struck, they responded with military-style organization and logistics. They even waged war against abstract concepts like poverty, ignorance, and environmental degradation. Their entire civilization is structured around conflict, Dion realized as she processed economic and social data. Their governments are organized to mobilize resources for struggle. Their educational systems train individuals to overcome challenges. Their entertainment focuses on competition and conflict resolution. Even their games simulate warfare. Students began to understand that human peaceful activities were often just warfare by other means. Their sports were stylized combat. Their business practices employed military strategies. Their scientific research was conducted like military campaigns against ignorance and natural limitations. Taehyun made the final, most disturbing discovery while analyzing human expansion patterns throughout their planet's history. Humans had not simply spread across Earth through gradual migration like most species. They had conquered it through systematic campaigns against every obstacle their world presented. They did not adapt to their environment, he concluded. They conquered it. They turned forests into farmland, diverted rivers to serve their needs, and carved mountains to create passages. They approached their own planet as an enemy to be defeated rather than a home to be preserved. The research team sat in stunned silence as the implications of their discoveries settled over them. They were not studying a species that had reluctantly developed military capabilities for defense. They were analyzing apex predators who had turned warfare into an art form and conflict into a way of life. As the students worked together to put together their final research report, Jinwoo stumbled upon something that completely turned their understanding upside down. What he discovered wasn't just surprising, it was earth-shattering in its implications for how they viewed humanity's place in the universe. Looking through countless historical records, archaeological findings, and anthropological studies, Jinwoo began to see a pattern that no one had recognized before. Human history wasn't just a random collection of events where people struggled to survive and fought with each other. Instead, it appeared to be something far more deliberate and systematic, like a carefully designed training program that had been running for thousands of years. Every major period in human history seemed to present increasingly difficult challenges. From the ice ages that forced early humans to develop advanced hunting techniques and shelter-building skills, to natural disasters that required communities to work together or perish, to diseases that pushed medical knowledge forward. Each era appeared to be testing humanity in different ways. The pattern was unmistakable once you knew what to look for. What made this discovery even more remarkable was how humans responded to these challenges. Unlike most species that would try to avoid danger and seek the easiest path to survival, humans seemed to actively seek out difficulties. They climbed the highest mountains not because they had to, but because they wanted to prove they could. They sailed across dangerous oceans to explore unknown lands. They pushed the boundaries of science and technology even when it meant risking their lives. This behavior wasn't limited to a few brave individuals. It was embedded in human culture across the globe. Every society had stories celebrating heroes who faced impossible odds. Children were raised on tales of adventure and courage. The greatest achievements in human history came from people who chose the harder path when easier options were available. The research team realized they had made a fundamental mistake in their initial assessment. They had been looking at humanity through the wrong lens entirely. The classification of humans as a primitive species wasn't just incorrect, it was dangerously wrong. This wasn't a young species stumbling around trying to figure out how civilization worked. Instead, the evidence painted a picture of something much more formidable. Humans weren't beginners in the cosmic arena. They were the end result of a brutal evolutionary process that had created the ultimate survivors. Every challenge their harsh planet had thrown at them had been conquered. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, massive extinctions, plagues, famines. Humanity had not just survived these catastrophes, but had emerged stronger each time. The hostile environment of Earth hadn't been humanity's weakness. It had been their greatest teacher. While other species might have evolved on peaceful worlds with abundant resources and few dangers, humans had been forged in a crucible of constant challenges. This had created a species that didn't just adapt to problems but actively solved them, often in ways that seemed impossible to other civilizations. Yun-Su took this revelation one step further by comparing human expansion patterns with historical records of how other galactic empires had spread across the stars. What he found sent chills down everyone's spine. The way humans were currently exploring space and establishing colonies matched exactly with the early expansion phases of every successful galactic empire in recorded history. This wasn't coincidence. The pattern was too precise, too methodical. Other species that had eventually dominated large portions of the galaxy had started their expansion in exactly the same way humans were doing now. They began with what appeared to be peaceful exploration, sending out small groups to establish research stations and colonies. They studied other species, learned about their technologies and cultures, and slowly built up their presence across multiple star systems. But history showed what came next. Once these expanding civilizations had enough knowledge about their neighbors and sufficient infrastructure spread across space, they inevitably shifted from peaceful exploration to systematic conquest. The transition usually happened so smoothly that other species didn't realize what was occurring until it was too late to resist. The correlation between humanity's current activities and these historical patterns was terrifying in its precision. Humans were following the exact same playbook that had been used by every successful galactic empire. They were in what military strategists would recognize as the intelligence gathering and positioning phase of a massive campaign. This revelation forced the research team to reconsider everything they thought they knew about human intentions and capabilities. What they had interpreted as curiosity and scientific interest might actually be reconnaissance. What looked like peaceful cultural exchange could be the careful study of potential opponents' strengths and weaknesses. The implications were staggering. If the pattern held true, humanity wasn't just another species joining the galactic community. They were potentially the next great conquering force that would reshape the entire cosmic order. The next morning was supposed to be just another routine presentation to the Galactic Council. Dayon had spent the entire night putting together their final slides, carefully organizing all the research they had gathered about humanity. She had prepared charts showing human development patterns, cultural analysis breakdowns, and recommendations for integration protocols. It was meant to be a straightforward academic presentation that would help the Council understand this new species better. But as dawn broke over the Council chambers, everything changed dramatically. Priority communication alerts began streaming in from monitoring stations across the galaxy. The messages came so fast that the communication systems could barely keep up. Emergency signals flashed on screens throughout the building, and the usual calm atmosphere of the Council chambers transformed into something much more urgent and frightening. The first report seemed almost impossible to believe. While the Galactic Council had been busy organizing welcome committees and preparing first contact ceremonies, human colonies had been quietly establishing themselves across 12 different star systems. This wasn't the slow, careful expansion that most new species attempted when they first joined the galactic community. This was rapid, systematic colonization, happening at a pace that defied all previous experience. Even more alarming were the reports about human technology development. In multiple scientific fields, human innovations were not just catching up to galactic standards but actually surpassing them. Their engineering solutions were more efficient, their medical techniques more effective, and their computational systems more advanced than what many established civilizations had achieved after centuries of development. This level of rapid advancement was unprecedented and deeply concerning to species that had assumed technological superiority. Perhaps most disturbing of all were the diplomatic reports. Human ambassadors and representatives had been quietly meeting with dozens of minor species throughout known space. These weren't the formal diplomatic contacts that were recorded in official council records. Instead, they were private conversations, cultural exchanges, and trade agreements that had been happening below the council's attention. Humanity had been building a network of relationships and alliances, while everyone else thought they were still learning basic galactic customs. As Taehyun watched the emergency sessions convening around them, the terrible truth became crystal clear. The entire galactic community had fundamentally misunderstood what was happening. They had been looking at humanity through the lens of typical new species integration, assuming that humans would follow the standard pattern of gradual introduction to galactic society. They had prepared welcome materials, assigned cultural liaisons, and scheduled orientation sessions, but humanity had never been interested in following standard procedures. While the galaxy was focused on first contact protocols and membership applications, humans had been doing what they had always done throughout their history. They had been studying their environment with methodical precision, identifying opportunities and potential challenges, and positioning themselves for maximum advantage. The systematic approach that had allowed humans to dominate every ecosystem on their hostile homeworld was now being applied to galactic civilization itself. They weren't asking for permission to join the galactic community. They were already integrating themselves into it on their own terms. Every cultural exchange had been a learning opportunity. Every trade negotiation had provided intelligence about galactic economic systems. Every diplomatic meeting had revealed information about political relationships and potential weaknesses. The realization hit the council members like a physical blow. They hadn't been managing first contact with a primitive species seeking guidance. They had been unknowingly observed and analyzed by a civilization that had been unconsciously preparing for this moment for thousands of years. Every survival challenge that Earth had thrown at humanity had been training for exactly this scenario, entering a complex environment full of potential competitors and systematically understanding how to thrive within it. Within hours of the first emergency reports, the students' research was immediately sealed under the highest security classifications available to the Galactic Council. Access was restricted to only the most senior council members and military commanders. What had started as an academic project about human cultural development had suddenly become critical intelligence about a potential existential threat to the established galactic order. Council chambers that were normally used for routine administrative meetings were hastily converted into war rooms. Senior diplomats, military strategists, and xenobiologists gathered in small groups, speaking in hushed and urgent tones about response options. Some advocated for immediate diplomatic pressure to slow human expansion. Others suggested economic sanctions or technology restrictions. A few extreme voices even whispered about more drastic measures. Minji stood in the middle of the chaos, watching everything unfold around her with a mixture of fascination and horror. She understood that their innocent academic research project had revealed something that would change the entire galaxy. The comfortable assumption that new species would naturally integrate into existing power structures had been completely shattered. The galaxy hadn't discovered a new member species that would gratefully accept guidance from more advanced civilizations. Instead, they had awakened something that had been unconsciously preparing for this moment, since the first human learned to make fire in a cave. The same drive that had pushed humanity to explore every corner of their dangerous planet, to survive ice ages and plagues, to build cities and civilizations despite constant challenges. That same relentless determination was now focused on understanding and potentially reshaping galactic civilization itself. The question that haunted everyone in those emergency sessions was simple, but terrifying. Was it already too late to respond effectively to humanity's expansion? Or was there still time to prevent the next galactic empire from rising to power?